And then you have the podcast bros for all those like young men that Trump is trying to target saying maybe support RFK. In races like in Texas, again, I don't think this affects the presidential race really, but this could depress people, or they could, I don't know, just vote for RFK, or it could, it's a wild card. If you have the Rogan types making these cases.
Let's hear Joe Rogan make his case that the only thing that makes sense is to vote for RFK.
That's just what they do. That's politics. They do it on the left. They do it on the right. They gaslight you. They manipulate you. They promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan. Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense to me. He's the only one that he doesn't attack people. He attacks actions and ideas, but he's much more reasonable. And
we should also just say, I mean, I think the other thing that Joe's not saying, and it's true. I mean, on some level, I think maybe RFK has not been in attack mode in the same way as Trump or Harris. But Joe Rogan just did a special where he basically said COVID, the only people we really lost for COVID were people who actually believed in COVID or believed that you should take a vaccine. We had 1.2 million people die. And vaccinating people, we still see the implications of vaccinations on death rates and populations. The country has largely decided to pretend like COVID doesn't exist anymore, although even like, Olympic athletes are taken out significantly. I know 2 people who had it this week. And still kills more people than the flu. Let's be clear. The flu was a pretty big deal in this country for quite a while. And RFK, of course, is is anti-vax. I mean, I really don't think there's any other way to say it. Like, I mean, he's highly skeptical. He's anti-vax. Joe Rogan is anti-vax. That may have something to do with why it only makes sense to Joe Rogan. But go with God. Here we go.
And ideas, but he's much more reasonable and intelligent. I mean, the guy was an environmental attorney and cleaned up the East River. I mean, he's a legitimate guy. You know, before anybody started calling him an anti.
I just want to say Hudson River, not the East River. He did a lot more work on the Hudson River, but that's okay. Go ahead.
And that really work was admirable, right? I mean, this is part 100%. Of why you guys were friendly, right, back in the day. And also why, he was someone I admired early on when I started out. And I met him at Standing Rock briefly. And that was the kind of activism he was engaged in when he was liberal. But something has happened. I don't know what.
Well, he has said, I think my understanding is that he has said his politics have changed. Well, and I think they've become more, libertarian.
But even so, I mean, that story about the bear from 10 years ago in 2014 was that he and his friends were driving around and they were all drinking. He wasn't. And that they found the dead bear on the side of the road.
No. He found the bear on the. He saw the bear being hit. Right. It became roadkill. He picked it up. He went out to dinner with the roadkill in his car. He was intending to keep the roadkill, which you can actually do.
I know. No.
The idea came up at a dinner where other people were drinking. He was supposed to head back to his home. He couldn't because he had to fly out the next day. Yeah. And so that's when they had the idea. So they weren't out drinking while they were driving.
I'm bringing fair enough on that point. I only bring it up. It's like this incredibly very rarefied rich person story of him coming back from a falconing excursion to go to Peter Luger's steakhouse or whatever the hell he was talking about. This is the kind of thing that I just feel like he's not this everyman that Rogan is describing. This is somebody who grew up in incredible privilege, and that comes out more in that story. And I think has affected his perception of the world.
I think that's definitely true as well. Go ahead.
He's a legitimate guy. Before anybody started calling him an anti-vaxxer, which I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book. I read The Real Anthony Fauci, and I'm like, what is... How much of this is real? Because if it's all real, this is fucking insane, and we live in a world where we're being manipulated by these health organizations that are being paid by the pharmaceutical drug interests. And these pharmaceutical drug companies are pumping these products out into the population and telling us that we need them, and then making insane amounts of money. And then also the government is in on it, and also they share a patent with Moderna, and also they share profits, and there's $700 million, however much money was made, whatever the number is that these guys made off of these products. Like, this is, all of it is fucking crazy. There's the revolving door between the CDC and the FDA and then these pharmaceutical drug companies. So the people that make the regulations then go on to have these cushy jobs with the pharmaceutical drug corporations. Like, oh, nothing to see here. It's like, it's open. It's right out in the open.
Right.
And when he talks about all that stuff in his book, you're just like, what the fuck, man? If this wasn't true, he would be sued.
Yeah, but
So it seems to be true.
Yeah.
And it's a scary thing because people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be attacked. They don't want to be called an anti-vaxxer. That's a big one.
Can you pause it? The idea that if it wasn't true, he would... Oh, that's really it. The idea that if it wasn't true, he would be sued. It's like quite difficult to prove defamation in this country. Like, very
Particularly
difficult.
for someone who is a public figure. Forget about it.
And particularly for someone who's making accusations about a public figure, right? You mean, yes, we're saying the same thing. Like with Fauci. And when he's making these accusations about the CDC and the revolving door, like, they all have, like conspiracies do, a kernel of truth at the center. But the conclusion that is reached is incorrect. Like, we do have too much capture in our regulatory institutions by industry.
And not just in the FDA and CDC.
But not just in the FDA.
Also the SEC,
right.
the DOJ, like every other agency we have, but that they don't.
But this is the wrong one. Like, the vaccine, we know there's no ambiguity in the science. It was safe and effective at preventing the transmission of COVID. And then when variants came, it's been helpful at preventing death and long-term disease. There's no ambiguity about that. So, like, the results from that regulatory analysis and process as it related to the COVID mRNA vaccine, the results are in on that front. If he wants to talk about broader regulatory capture of our industries, maybe he should turn his attention to, like, I don't know, when Trump appointed Scott Pruitt to lead the EPA, and Pruitt's entire career up to that point was about dismantling the entire EPA. Like, those are and working for big oil. These are the kinds of things that are actually poisoning our rivers, that are actually harming our communities. And what I find so insidious about what Rogan has basically done for, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars by Spotify is he's misdirected righteous anger about some of those failures in our system to the exact wrong messenger in RFK, and like to making it about vaccines when that's not the issue at play here.
Andy from Kansas City says 70% true, 30% dangerously false. Very dangerous way of laundering that theory into a legitimate complaint. A future reactionary says the disappointing thing about the Rogan clip is it's so close-ish to a real critique, but it's just so prone to conspiracy theories that he can't help himself. Yeah, that's really the point. Is that, like, yes, there is regulatory capture, like you say. Yes, we should have had those profits. We funded a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
We should have taken all the profits, frankly. Or, you give it 10%, whatever it is. It's all that type of stuff. And, look, safety amongst vaccines is like safety of like any medical procedure. It's not 100% safe to take Tylenol or aspirin or whatever. I mean, there are people who have reactions to all sorts of drugs.
Or human growth hormone, for example, if that's relevant to Joe Rogan at all.
Of course. But like any procedure you go in, when the doctor says it's safe, they're not saying it's 100% safe. They're saying it's 99% safe. They're 95% safe. We're 92% safe. Well, I mean, whatever it is, like that is simply a reality. And in the context of public health policy, that's the way they do it. I mean, it's not enough to say like, well, the death rate amongst people who, weren't over the age of 55 and didn't have, weren't overweight is blah, blah, blah. You're just splicing there because we're in an interconnected society. And this is also part of why they assault public health, is because the libertarian brains do not want that concept that we are that interconnected to be out there. Because once you sort of accept that interconnectedness, then it begins to undermine a whole host of libertarian ideas. And much of those ideas are basically to enrich a specific type of person.
Well, let's be clear too. It's also
wealthy
self-serving.
white ones who already have money.
For Rogan, yes, and Rogan's included in that he sells supplements on his website, or he sold his supplement company, or he's basically in the business of these kind of like off-market, under-regulated modes of improving your health. That has that's the problem, honestly, with the regulators, is some of those supplements need to be more heavily regulated. We've covered that before on this program. Yep. And I don't think it should go unsaid that these people that are in the business of selling these supplements may have an issue with that regulatory thrust as it relates to their own business practices.
Did I just see that Tim Pool decided to endorse RFK or
no? I don't
RFK?
think that's. I think I saw that tweet.
I may have saw a tweet. That would make sense.
I saw a tweet that Nick Fuentes also has been distancing, and there was a New Republic article about it, that Nick Fuentes also is distancing themselves from Trump. I think they're hedging to because they feel like he's going to lose.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.